Hello! In this video, I want to explain what is so crazy about the Bosnian War. The Bosnian War became a synonym for pointless ethnic violence. We have instances of people that went together to high school later finding each other on the battlefield and killing each other. A Danish historian, Christian Nielsen, even brings us a story of a Muslim guy that was tortured at Prijedor in a concentration camp, recognizing a guy from his high school as one of the guards, a Serbian guard in the camp. Here we can see a Bosnian soldier that returned home from the war only to see his entire village massacred by the Serbian military. And while outside of the Balkan region, this war is mostly famous as a war between Muslims and Serbs. From a Croatian perspective, what is even more interesting is the fact that Croatians and Muslims go to war with each other while still fighting the Serbs. And actually more Croatians in Bosnia end up dying fighting the Muslims than they die fighting the Serbs. That is also kind of absurd. But so what happens? As communism falls across Eastern Europe, Tito is also dead at this point. He was a unifying figure. And a new leader of Yugoslavia emerges, Slobodan Milosevic, who abolishes the autonomy of Kosovo. And that is why Croatia and Slovenia start fearing that they might be next, and they proclaim independence. In Slovenia, the war only lasted for 10 days and 69 people die in that war. In Croatia, the Croatian War of Independence lasted for 4 years and somewhere around 20,000 people died. Around 15,000 Croatians and around 6,000 Serbs. But in Bosnia, the war ends up killing 100,000 people. And while the war is happening in Croatia and Slovenia, some people in Bosnia naively believe that because Bosnia has a long history of multicultural coexistence, that there won't be war in Bosnia. Many in Bosnia still believe that Bosnia is special, that precisely because Bosnia has this really long history of multicultural coexistence, that there won't be a war in Bosnia. Many naively believe it, but others had this joke. I'm getting this from the book written by Christian Nielsen, a Danish historian. Bosnians, famous for their dark humor, had this joke that what's happening in Croatia is the semi-finals, and that what's going to happen in Bosnia will be the finals. Football or soccer was also very popular in Yugoslavia, which is why they used that metaphor. Yugoslavia was actually quite good at football. And yeah, it turns out the people that predicted there will be the finals in Bosnia were right. 100,000 people end up dying in the Bosnian War, which is quite a lot given the fact that Bosnia has around 4 million people. But I would say that the craziest aspect of the Bosnian War is the Croat-Muslim War, or the Croat-Bosniak War, as it is called in literature. Well, what's crazy about it? When the war began, Croatians and Muslims, despite having a lot of differences, they couldn't agree whether Bosnia will be a highly centralized entity or a very decentralized entity in which Croatians will have a high degree of autonomy. Despite not being able to agree, Muslims and Croatians decided to become allies against Bosnian Serbs, who wanted to essentially unify their part of Bosnia with Serbia. Croatia, both the Republic of Croatia and Bosnian Croatians recognized territorial integrity of Bosnia. They just couldn't agree whether Bosnia will be a highly centralized state or a federation. And after all, it was very logical for two weaker sides to be allies, despite their differences. We often see in history, for example, in the Cambodian Civil War, the Vietnamese and Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge, were allied against the Americans throughout the war, throughout the Cambodian Civil War, and then when the Americans were defeated, Pol Pot decides to do a genocide of the Vietnamese. You know, you could say kind of an asshole move, but at least it makes sense to wait until the stronger side is defeated. But Croatians and Muslims, well, they go to war anyway while fighting with Serbia. Well, why does that happen? Okay, so the president of the Croatians in Bosnia, Mate Boban, he proclaims an autonomous region inside Bosnia, which one could argue was a mistake. So he proclaims the autonomous region inside of Bosnia, and he is here actually copying the Bosnian Serbs in what they were doing, but there was one very big difference, and that is Croatia still officially recognized the territorial integrity of Bosnia, and so did the Croatians inside of Bosnia. But I happen to agree with Christian Nilsson that Mate Boban actually wanted to unify like the Croatian part of Bosnia with Croatia, but he didn't want to lose international support for Croatia, so his take was let's wait and see what happens. Like, if Serbia manages to conquer parts of Bosnia, then maybe in the future Croatians will do the same. But what actually triggers the war between Croatians and Muslims is the Vance-Owen peace plan. That is also what's tragic about it. There aren't that many conflicts in which a peace plan actually triggers the war. So Vance-Owen suggests this kind of redistribution of territory within Bosnia. So you can see the areas belonging to Croatians were supposed to be blue. And the problem is, the Croatians were the only ones to agree to this peace proposal. Later, the Serbs, their leader Karadzic, agrees, but then after 2 weeks he says he doesn't agree, and only after Karadzic denounces the deal do the Muslims accept it. So yeah, the deal was never accepted, but the Croatians in Bosnia see this as essentially sign that the international community will recognize their territorial claims, and they start an offensive against the Muslims in the Lashvanska Valley. The offensive was also partially provoked by some mujahedeens that came from Afghanistan to help Bosnia, but the Bosnians couldn't really control them. The mujahedeens were famous for doing pointless war crimes often, like beheading people and stuff like that. And the Croatian military also wants to capture the explosives factory in Kulen Vakuf. But what happens after the offensive is probably the worst thing that the Croatian military did in Bosnia, or I should say the military of the Croatians in Bosnia. They massacre Muslims in the village of Ahmići. They force them to enter a mosque, and then they destroy the mosque. And at that point, Croatians in Bosnia are recruiting people from prisons, so ultimately people that were already guilty of violent crimes end up doing this horrible act, and they were doing it as vengeance, as collective vengeance for what the Mujahedin had previously done to the Croatians. And after that horrible event, some Muslim generals actually proclaimed that now they don't want peace with the Croatians, and the Croatian-Muslim War starts. But what's absurd about it is that on some battlefields, Croatians and Muslims just refused to go to war. On other battlefields, there was a three-way war. For example, in the city of Jajce, you can see it on the screen. In the city of Jajce, everybody was at war with everybody. So Croatians and Muslims, while shooting at each other, were shooting at the Serbs. But the most absurd thing that happened in the city of Konjic, where the Serbs actually provided artillery and tanks for the Croatians. And they were at war with Croatians, both in Croatia and in Bosnia. To quote a CIA operative observing the war, everything was possible in this three-way war. And if you actually thought that things couldn't get crazier than just a three-way war, everybody against everybody, well, things actually do get crazier. I'll explain what happens in just a moment. But the Bosnian War is also famous for the last genocide that happened in Europe. You can see that in Srebrenica, a bit more than 8,000 Muslims were killed in just a few weeks. The Serbian military, led by Mladic and the political leader Karadzic, you can see him on the picture, were convicted for that genocide. They gave the order, kill all Muslim men older than 14. And what's particularly shameful about this genocide is that the UN troops actually ran away when the Serbian military attacked the Muslim city of Srebrenica. They were supposed to defend the city. Now, why did they run away? Well, they didn't actually have proper training, they were outnumbered, but still, it is one of the biggest failures in the history of UN. I generally do believe that UN is a good institution, but in this instance, it was really bad, you know. And there's even this joke in Bosnia, you know, when you wish somebody harm, you say, may God make it so that the UN protects you. And yeah, it's really a tragic story. So 8,000 Muslims were essentially transported to the woods, machine gunned there, and then buried in mass graves. And I'm not saying that other sides also didn't commit war crimes, but this one was the biggest, and this one was genocide. I do agree with the international courts here. When you kill 8,000 people in such a small time span, it is a genocide. But now actually, let's return to the three-way war. What the CIA operative said, everything is possible in this crazy three-way war. Well, it actually becomes a four-way war for a moment when Western Bosnia proclaims independence from the rest of Bosnia. So what actually happens? This corrupt Muslim businessman, Fikret Abdic, who had his own military, was charged with corruption. And then, instead of just going to jail, he decides to proclaim a mini-independent state in the middle of Bosnia and go to war with the rest of Bosnia. And of course the Serbs were delighted. Even the Bosnian Croatians recognized his small state. And there was a special Serbian paramilitary unit called the Spiders, tasked with helping this guy. So in this aspect, the conflict really starts to remind me of the war in Congo, where you just had random parts of Congo seceding during the military conflict, and the Western Bosnia becomes, in the words of Christian Nielsen, a Danish historian, a heaven for criminals, smugglers, drug dealers, weapon smugglers. But this horrible war is finally brought to an end by the Dayton Agreement. So the Clinton administration pressures Croatians and Muslims to finally make peace in 1994, which I think is an example of actually a good American intervention. Croatian military, as a reward for making peace in Bosnia, and Tudjman, the Croatian president here, had a lot of influence on the Bosnian Croatians. Tudjman was given satellite images of Serbian positions inside of Croatia as a reward for making peace with the Muslims. And NATO also agrees to help Croatians and Muslims. They agree to bomb the Serbian positions inside of Bosnia. That also helps. And then the Operation Storm happens. Croatia reclaims its territory, and in the end, the Dayton Accords are signed by all sides. Russia at the time, interestingly, did not provide the Serbian side with satellite images, Yeltsin didn't really care that much about what happens, and he was busy attacking his own parliament at the time, you know. So Russia was kind of too chaotic to intervene, and actually Russian mafia, quite ironically at the time, sold a lot of guns to Croatia, you know, despite the Russians historically being an allies of Serbia. And yeah, NATO also decides to start to bomb Serbian positions. They were outraged by the fact that Karadzic, the Serbian leader, captured some UN soldiers as hostages, and that is how war is brought to an end. You can see here how Bosnia looks like today, and I would argue that the Dayton Accords left all three sides frustrated, but it is probably because of that precisely that all sides decided to agree with the Dayton Accords, in which Croatians and Muslims got their own part and Republika Srpska, or the Serbian part, became separate. So all sides kind of feel cheated, you know. Serbs just want to unify with Serbia. Muslims feel that genocide was rewarded by the establishment of Republika Srpska, and Croatians feel that it is not fair that they do not have their own part, just like the Serbs. But ultimately, the agreement did bring peace to Bosnia. Okay, if you like this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.